call this my coming out of the closet song. I'm not at all ashamed to say that I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. Got little pots of pipe spread out all over the lot, 'cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Well, I got the seed from Mexico. Stick it in some dirt and let it grow. Put it in my garden with my peppers and my peas, and I get all the smoke I need for free. 'Cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. We'll keep it where no one can see, so let's keep this between you and me. But I'm growing marijuana in my yard. 'Cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. I can't tell I'm boss or I'll get fired. I don't grow much, just what I use. I work all day, and when I'm through, I smoke some marijuana from my yard. Now the policeman wants to talk to me. He says, how you gonna smoke up all that weed? He says, money's what you're in it for. Don't you know we're in a war? Now I'm gonna haul your ass downtown, please. I said, hey man, what is it to you? How do I infringe on what you do? Well, I beg your pardon if you're offended by my garden, but I just can't grow Prozac in my yard. So I grow my own medicine in my yard. I give some to my neighbor for his heart. Share it with my grandma who keeps it from her son, 'cause we all know that stuff's against the law. Now there's nothing growing in my yard, 'cause cops will call my land and both my cars. Now I have to buy my pot from a teenager in the parking lot who's growing marijuana in his yard. Oh, anyone can grow it in their yard. They like to show you how, it ain't hard. Never mind the president, let's overgrow the government and all grow marijuana in our yard. Let's grow some marijuana.
Okay, here we are with another episode of Pot Talk TV. And here on Pot Talk, our main mission is we want to free all marijuana prisoners, and we don't want any more going in. We're tired of seeing our brothers and sisters arrested, parents losing children because they smoke a joint, children being taken away from parents because young kids being taken away from parents because they smoked a joint, young kids' careers being ruined because they got caught with a little bit of pot. Now they can't get loans to go to college. Not that I recommend that these kids get loans to go to college, because most of them just wind up in debt. But for the chance of them to be able to do that is a shame that so many lives are being destroyed by a law that's unconstitutional from the start, fraudulent from the start. And Randy was telling me about some new information that I'd like to turn it over to Randy, and then I'll comment on what Randy has.
Well, this just came out today from Reuters, and I believe also Democracy Now! Is where Glenn Greenwald, who is one of the reporters, actually the reporter for The Guardian of England, who works out of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and he's been breaking a lot of the Edward Snowden revelations. However, in the various relays that I've heard of the information I'm going to give you, I've heard Glenn Greenwald and Democracy Now! Credited for this, but I have not heard that this is one of the Edward Snowden releases. But nevertheless, it does have to do with surveillance, and surveillance that is going on not only since 2011, not only since the Clinton administration and its war on drugs, not even since Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan and their war on drugs. This goes all the way back to the Nixon administration in 1970, starting the very drug war itself, and starting something we all know and we see on any prescription script that we ever get, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, apparently a secret provision of its original act, had an unknown sub-agency called the Special Operations Division, also known as SOD, S-O-D, Special Operations Division. And the Special Operations Division would use any tactic, and continues to use any tactic, to gather information on any suspected drug activity of any kind, and develops cases using parallel evidence. In other words, this Special Operations Division gathers all of this information by illegal surveillance, paying people to be informants, like I strongly suspect happened at some places that we share mutually in our past in New York City, where we would be sure that one of these strange agents was coming in. Well, that was probably somebody from the Special Operations Division acting illegally, but it didn't matter, because then when they had that information, they would use drug-sniffing dogs or informants or any other kind of semi-legal evidence to create a parallel case, and then the SOD, the Special Operations Division evidence, would be expunged from the record because it's secret, intended never to be known about the American public. And so then it will go back into hiding and cooperate with people like here locally, the Urgent, the Ulster Regional Gang and Narcotics Task Force, help them develop parallel cases when in fact they've gathered all of this information and surveillance illegally. And that apparently is in the original Drug Administration Act, as I said, that's been in force since the early 1970s and was part of Richard Nixon's original war on drugs. And that's it.
Okay, now, if you people out there in television land, we've been telling you about the drug war and how illegal it is, and the fact that they've been spying on the American people, on drug people. You people, most people out there in America said, I don't care, they're spying on the druggers and they can do whatever they have to do to get them. But what they were doing all through this drug war, every bit of it has been illegal, has been a violation of people's rights. And the same spying methods that they used on all the drug people, now they're doing on the computers, on your cell phone, on everything. But it was okay to do it to the druggers. Now they're doing it to you.
They were practicing.
Right, they were practicing. They were implementing this, bringing it in. And you people out there in television land allowed it because they were doing it to the druggers, and it didn't involve me. Well, now it involves you. Now they're tapping your phone, they're tapping your television, they're tapping your internet, they're putting meters on your house that tell everything you can do. Is this a government that you want? Is this a government you can be proud of? Is this a government that's out of control, people? Wake up. Could you run that now, Felicia?
Glenn, I also wanted to ask you about a news story you just tweeted about that was published today by Reuters. The article begins, quote, "A secretive U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration unit is funneling information from intelligence intercepts, wiretaps, informants, and a massive database of telephone records to authorities across the nation to help them launch criminal investigations of Americans. Although these cases rarely involve national security issues, documents reviewed by Reuters show law enforcement agents have been directed to conceal how such investigations truly begin, not only from defense lawyers, but also some sometimes from prosecutors and judges. The unit of the DEA that distributes the information is called the Special Operations Division, or SOD. Glenn Greenwald, can you talk more about this?
So this should be a huge scandal for the following reason. The essence of the Constitution is that the government cannot obtain evidence or information about you unless it has probable cause to believe that you've engaged in a crime, and then goes to a court and gets a warrant, and only then is that evidence usable in a prosecution against you. What this secret agency is doing, according to Reuters, it is circumventing that process by gathering all kinds of information without any court supervision, without any oversight at all, using surveillance technologies and other forms of domestic spying. And then when it gets this information that it believes it can be used in a criminal prosecution, it knows that that information can't be used in a criminal prosecution because it's been acquired outside of the legal and constitutional process. So they cover up how they really got it, and they pretend, they make it seem as though they really got it through legal or normal means by then going back and retracing the investigation once they already have it and reacquiring it so that it looks to defense counsel and even to judges and prosecutors like it really was done in the constitutionally permissible way. So they're prosecuting people and putting people in prison for using evidence that they've acquired illegally, which they're then covering up and lying about and deceiving courts into believing was actually required constitutionally. It's a full frontal assault on the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments and on the integrity of the judicial process, because they're deceiving everyone involved in criminal prosecutions about how this information has been obtained.
Okay, now you've seen how bad it is, people. They've been doing this, you just heard, since Nixon. But it was okay when they were doing it to the drug users, but now they're doing it to the whole country. Isn't it time that we the people, wake up and start demanding we put a stop? And the best way for everybody out there is act locally. We want it to stop in this community. Like Randy said before, we have urgent right here in Ulster County, and they are doing this. They are spying on your internet stuff, and they're listening to your telephone conversations. And if they find out that, let's say, someone out there is doing something, selling a little pot or getting together with some friends to get high, they learn that. So now they know how to do it, and they haven't done it legally. Well, now what they can do is, a policeman just happened to stop at your door like they did at mine and Jay's. And he knocked on the door looking for someone who supposedly was using a car illegally, came to the wrong house, and smelt, wrong building even, and smelt marijuana, and said that was their reason to force their way in without a warrant, arrest me and Jay, drag us to court, which there's never been a conclusion to that case because we actually know how to fight in court, and we showed that everything they did was illegal. But the average person doesn't know the stuff that me and my son know or me and Paula know, and the average person winds up going to jail or being on probation or getting put in one of these drug rehab programs, which is another big scam just to drain money and to enslave people. It's time for you people out there to wake up and start demanding change. But demand it locally. Right here in this town, we should demand less police, right here in Woodstock, and even down in New York. Since this show will be shown in New York City, when the demonstrators were demonstrating down on Wall Street, there were more police to watch the demonstrators and to spy on them and to do all kinds of stuff.
Threaten them, intimidate
them, shut down their media. Whenever they had cameras going, they found a reason to shut it down. If they had some electricity so they could communicate, they found a way to shut it down. This is government shutting down free speech, intimidating people. Destroying cameras.
Putting the handcuffs on really, really tight, so it's just like some kind of punishment thing, even though there was no probable cause. Nobody signed a complaint, so you don't arrest somebody without a cause.
And for you people down in New York City, you should start demanding, we don't need all these police. We've got too many police. Or I don't even mind. You know what? It's not that I'm against the police. It's what the police are being used for. You know, the police should be peace officers, not officers of the law, because the law is out of control, and the law is actually unlawful. So when they act in an unlawful manner, how can we the people stand for it? It's time for we the people to stand up and demand change. Now, the politicians that we've elected down in New York City and up here in Woodstock are not looking out for the best interest of the people. So it's time to fire them, get them out, bring in new people, and tell the new people, if you don't do what the people want, we'll fire you and we'll elect somebody else until we get somebody that's not going to sell out to big corporations, that's not going to treat the people like slaves, that's going to respect the rights of the individual. That is what all of us should be fighting for on the local level, on the county level, on the state level. And by doing that, we could get all the states back. Right now, the federal government has bribed all the states. They say, well, we'll give a certain amount. First of all, they tax
$1 million a year.
Wait, no, first of all, they tax all the states and all this money goes to Washington. Then they turn around and say, well, we'll give you some of your money back in a grant, but in order to get this grant, you got to do this. In order to get this grant, you got to do that. Like in order to get a grant for welfare, you have to run by our rules and you have to implement it our way. And that makes it very limited, and it becomes such a bureaucracy that the amount of money that's supposed to be going to the welfare is not really getting to the welfare of people, because you've got this whole bureaucracy that needs to be fed before it gets to the people who need the food. You know, it's become such a big money grab, and everybody's worried about their job, and what they're doing is all the way down the line, people are selling out their country. You local welfare workers, you're getting a check and you think you got a nice fat job, but because there's so many welfare workers and you got to make them jump through this hoop and jump through that hoop and fill out this paper and fill out that paper, all that filling out papers and all that takes time and money, and that money could actually be going to food, shelter, and homes for the American people.
You're a professional time waster.
Right.
I mean, people are going to have to start taking a good hard look at their jobs and what they're being asked to do, and then having the strength to know that as the people wake up, and that's why it's important, people who are watching me and Joe, that they actually really study it, not just us, but the people that we point to, because we've been very fortunate to have learned from others, many of whom had to pay a very heavy price for this knowledge. But this is a cyclic process that's happened throughout the ages. Deception can only go so long before its apparent rot to the whole society is so obvious that people start to rally together and to fix it up again. And that's the bright side, is to learn law and to know that when you go by law, tremendous healing comes about and is available.
Right. And again, we would like to remind all you people, a lot of the stuff that we've been trying to teach you and stuff, if you go to our website, freedomfirstparty.net, go there and look up, watch the Rod class stuff. There's actually 7 hours of Rod class, which is a seminar, and then there's 1 hour with Paula on foreclosure stuff, and there's 1 hour with me on basically on the drug war and on our freedom of our freeing all our marijuana prisoners. But
Private Attorney General.
Rod is one of the most best of all the researchers who's researched how the government has scammed us. Not what the lawyers will never tell you the stuff that you're going to see on Rod class. So go to freedomfirstparty.net and put in Rod class. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we've got on there. You can watch if you like music we got music stuff up there. If you got, tell them some of the other stuff we have up there.
But I'm just thinking right now about Jeremy Wilbur not wanting to hire a lawyer to fight Time Warner. I think we'd be in a great position because Jeremy Wilbur has proven himself pretty irrelevant to this process. He's not protected the people's free speech, so I think we should go directly at Time Warner ourselves. We need to find out who the principals are.
Well, we know one of the principals is a guy named Alan Gary.
Well, why don't you tell that great story? You got cut off the other day. I was waiting for that. We promised people that, right, Randy?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We back in for the 20th anniversary, I'm going to start all over from the beginning. Before the 20th anniversary, the year before, they asked Michael Lang if he was going to do a 20th anniversary. I saw it on television. He said he didn't think that many people would be interested in Woodstock. Well, about 2 weeks before the Woodstock Festival anniversary was going to happen, I went out to Bethel because I used to go, every few years I would go out there to see what was happening on the Woodstock date. And usually there'd be a lot of people would show up there. And sometimes there'd be some people playing music, with guitars, and it would be kind of a beer tailgate party. But for the 20th anniversary, when I went there about 2 weeks before the show, I was amazed. There were a couple thousand people camped out on the site. Everybody was saying, oh, I remember I was over there when it happened, and I was over there, and all these people, some of them who brought their kids to show where they were when Woodstock happened.
They were conceived.
Right. Where they were, Paula said where they were conceived, in case you missed it. But anyway, everybody kept saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if it happened again? Wouldn't it be, after a couple days of me hearing everyone saying, wouldn't it be nice if it happened again, I decided, let's just do it, right? So I had a little bit of money with me, and a guy named Ben Magic was there with a friend with a pickup truck, and I gave the money to Ben Magic and sent him to the lumber yard to get some plywood and some 2x4s, and we didn't get enough to build a stage, but I knew once we started building a stage, all the people that were saying, wouldn't it be nice if it would happen again, would chip in and start making it happen. So while we were nailing it together, we sent out 3 girls. We started nailing this. People say, what are you doing? So, oh, we're building a stage. We're going to put on a concert. And we didn't have a pot to piss in, but we were putting it on. And then we sent out 3 girls with a hat to collect some money, and we collected enough money to build a stage, and we built a stage. And there was a girl in the audience who was a folk singer who traveled around doing gigs in bars, and she had a little sound system with her that she did. And I talked her into letting us put it on stage, and we put a guy up with actually she did the first couple songs, and then another guy came up who had a guitar and did a bunch of songs. And we called up, I knew some bands down in New York City, and called them and told them to start coming up. And there were a few musicians on the site, so now we had music going on the Woodstock site. And one of the news crews came from one of the channels down in New York City, and they broadcast, they said, well, for the first time in 20 years, there's music on the Woodstock site, and they showed a picture of our little stage with a band on it. Well, at that night, you should have seen the cars, the headlights coming in. It was, people were pouring into the site, and from that...
Got an idea whose time has come.
Right, it was an idea whose time has come, right? And we just said, let's do it, and it just manifests. Now, that became what we called the People's Festival, because it was completely by the people. Everyone who was working it for free out of love. No one was getting paid. And so since I was basically stage managing and putting the bands on and getting them off, people came up to me and said, well, I'd like to say save the whale, or save the trees, or save the forest, or save something. Anytime someone came up to me that wanted to save something between bands, I put them up there. And we did a lot legalize marijuana from that stage, and it was that stage was dedicated to free speech and free music, and we did that for a couple years. Now, all of a sudden, all the greedy people started saying, here's something we could here's something we could make money on. So then all kinds of squeezes came. We had a guy named Robert Gersh, who was head of multiple sclerosis, who took the money from multiple sclerosis, and he went and bought truckloads, tandem truckloads of chicken shit, and he dumped it on the site to try to drive us off. That was the first attempt. And they put mountains of chicken shit. Well, we just moved our free festival down the road. There was a guy named Charlie Maynard, an Indian man, who had a big piece of property and said, well, you people can move the festival down here. So we moved it down there, and we managed to keep the Free People's Festival alive. We were calling it the Woodstock Free Festival as opposed to the Woodstock Pay Festival, right? Now Michael Lang started saying, well, maybe I'm going to do the 25th. Now the greedy landlord, at the time we thought the landlord owned the property, a lady named June Galish, because she had a deed and she was shaking it at everybody saying, I own Woodstock property and I want to make money off it, and I'm going to let Michael Lang do it, right? And so now Michael Lang was supposed to come in there and do his show there, but the landlord was double extra greedy, and after they had already made an agreement that it was going to be for a certain amount of money, I think it was $1 million or $2 million, the greedy people who had the deed said, no, we want double that. And Michael Lang said, no, I think I'm going to go do it in Saugerties because I'm not going to pay double that. So now the festival went back to, by now we started calling it Freedom Fest, because now Michael Lang had the name for Woodstock, so we were trying to keep the Free People's Festival free for the people, so we called it Freedom Fest, right? Now, after Michael Lang comes, what was his name for the Beatles? Not Brian Epstein. The guy who brought him here for the Ed Sullivan Show. I can't think of his name. Anyway.
George Martin?
No.
Jewish name, right?
Yeah. Anyway, I can't think of his name, but he's the guy who brought the Beatles to Shea Stadium.
Brian Epstein?
And brought, no. Brian was their manager. But anyway, he was supposed to do, he got the Rulin family up there who own a lot of the Woodstock real estate and their insurance company were supposed to back him to do a festival. But they were just running him along because they wanted it to die, and they pulled their money out at the last minute. And we had moved the Woodstock, the Free Festival, to another piece of property because we thought that, what was his name? I can't remember his name. He even wanted me to run the stage, to be his stage manager. Yeah. And I was going to be stage manager there and still keep Freedom Fest alive. And then came Time Warner Cable and Alan Gary. Dun, 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 yeah.
Dun, 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 da, 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 da.
Right. Anyway, now Abigail Storm and Daniel Eggink, a lot of you people know him, and me and a few other people, were really fighting to keep the Woodstock site a place for all people, as a free site for anybody, open to the public, since everywhere in this country there's historic sites for every battlefield. This is the Gettys battlefield, this is this battlefield, this is that. Woodstock was the only place where 1 million people gathered for peace. So we wanted that to be a historic, natural place for all people. Now we come to find out that the deed that this lady, June Galish, who was collecting money and saying she owns it, we find out that She was actually the girlfriend of a guy named Louis Nicotopoulos. And Louis Nicotopoulos actually owned the land. And when Mr. Nicotopoulos died, somehow the deed became June Galish, and it was signed over to her from Louis Nicotopoulos. But now Louis Nicotopoulos had a wife. And his wife was contesting because June Galish had spent all the money from all the holdings of Louis Nicotopoulos, and the only thing left that she hadn't taken all the money from was the Woodstock site. So Mrs. Nicotopoulos down in Brooklyn filed a case against June Galish and the deed, and that deed was brought into court down in Brooklyn, and the deed was proven in court to be a forgery, that it was not Mr. Nicotopoulos' signature. So if Mr. Nicotopoulos didn't sign it over to June Galish, and the deed she had was bogus, then the rightful owner was Mrs. Nicotopoulos, who was the wife and the real heir to the inheritance of Mr. Nicotopoulos. Now comes Time Warner, who wants to get the deal. And since the town of Bethel and all that really didn't know much about what had gone down, some of the politicians there knew what was going on down in Brooklyn, but they chose to look the other way like sleazy politicians do. All right? Now, the local town officials were all claiming, because they were benefiting from it too, oh yeah, it's June's land, it's June's land. But now Abigail had discovered the truth, and we had the facts that actually June Galish did not own the land, but Alan Gary came along, who was one of the prime people of Time Warner, and Alan Gary decided he was going to buy the Woodstock site because he wanted to control it, right? And he didn't like the stage for free speech, and he didn't like us saying legalize marijuana. There was a whole lot of stuff that he didn't like about what our stage was about. So he wanted to put a stop to it, right? So Alan Gary purchased a forged deed from June Galish. Now, we knew that Alan Gary had purchased a forged deed, so me and Abigail and Daniel and Jewel Eggink and Jay, my son, and my daughter Joy, we all decided we were going to take a stand on the Woodstock site and refuse to get off because he put up no trespassing signs. Do you believe the arrogance of this man to now think that a site that had been walked by people for 10 years, there is such a thing as
Eminent domain.
Not just eminent domain.
Right-of-way.
Right, public right-of-way. Easement, that's the word I was looking for. There was an easement on this site, which meant it could not be fenced. But he fenced it and used police to hold off, to try to drive people off. He started fencing it, and he was driving people off. So we took a stand, and we sat on the land, and when they told us to get off, we said, prove you own it. You don't own it. We're not getting off. We were trying to hold for the people what was rightfully the people's. People had a right of way to that piece of property. So now he decided he had them arrest us. Now we decided we were going to take it to court, and we got a local lawyer who knew all about real estate and knew quite a bit about easements, and we showed him the facts that the deed was forged. We showed him the paperwork from down in Brooklyn where it was ruled by handwriting experts in court that the deed that June Galish had was not Mr. Nicotopoulos' signature, therefore it was a forgery. So we told our lawyer all this, and we were ready to go to court and say to Alan Gary in court, and Time Warner, who was moving in, and the head guy that they had was a guy named Darrell Supak, who worked for Alan Gary as the main guy trying to drive the hippies off the site, who had been, at one time, the head for the Pentagon Security. So here we have Time Warner Cable and Alan Gary trying to take the Woodstock site and stop free speech, and
with a forged deed.
With a forged
and
deed.
National security.
And not national security. the head of security for the Pentagon. This is high-level people. They had the cops there with these super helmets on that had computers in them and earphones so they could talk to the cop while they were video. If they were talking to you, they were videoing you, and the cop was, and somebody back at some headquarters was seeing through their visor you talking to the police officer, and the cop had an earphone in his ear that they could say, arrest this one, or let this one go, or send him on his way, or, it was top security shit that they were using against us on the woods, just to drive a bunch of hippies off the Woodstock site. Now, this is Time Warner Cable financing all this spy apparatus that they were using on us. What were you going to say?
It's fraud.
Yeah. And it was all illegal, everything they were doing, because the deed was forged.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Now, we go into court, and we find out that Alan Gary had made a huge contribution to the judge's campaign to be judge. And he had just been elected because Alan Gary had just given him all this money. So when now we went before this bogus judge, this criminal judge, and we said, if Mr. Gary had no right to arrest us for being on property that he did not own. And we said, if Mr. Gary owned that property and legally had a right to arrest us, then have Mr. Gary produce the deed to show that he owned it, right? And we were armed with the proof that that deed was a fraud from the case down in Brooklyn, that it was a forgery. The judge said to us, Mr. Garrity, what's his name again? Mr. Gary, Alan Gary. Mr. Gary is a billionaire. If Mr. Gary says he owns the Woodstock site, he owns the site, and he don't have to produce the deed.
Because he owns me.
Right. Now, we were being charged with trespass, and we're saying if you had us arrested, prove that you had a right to, that you own the land, that you have a right to arrest us. Now, the judge just said, he's a millionaire. That's good enough for me. That's good enough for me. If he says he owns it, he owns it. And besides, he gave a big campaign to my campaign. He gave big money to my campaign. So fuck you, hippies. Right? Okay. So that's a little history of Time Warner Cable. Now, it goes even further. He finds us guilty. We say to our lawyer, we want to appeal this. And our lawyer knows that we're right, and he's telling us everything. Yep, you got the paperwork. This judge never should have ruled that. Yep, we're going to appeal it. So we give it to the lawyer, and we go away. This is why I don't do lawyers anymore. This taught me never use lawyers ever again. Now, the lawyers, we're waiting for the lawyer to file the paperwork for the appeal. We don't hear nothing from him for a while, and it's time, the appeal time ran out that he should have appealed. So me and Abigail and Daniel go to see the lawyer and say, what's happening with the appeal? He says, well, I didn't file it. We said, why didn't you file it? He said, look, I got a family, I work in this town, I'm a real estate lawyer. These guys are so big and powerful, you could never find a more powerful enemy than you guys are fighting. And his lawyers told me, and this is, Abigail and Daniel were present when this lawyer told us this, that his lawyers told me, if I file this paperwork for appeal, I'll never work in this county again. And I have a wife and kids, and I can't afford to not be able to work, and so he didn't file our appeal. But that's the kind of sleazy stuff that Time Warner Cable does. And because of that, the free festival that was dedicated to free speech died. Now you got basically out in Bethel every year that everybody runs out there, but it's basically a tailgate party, a bunch of beer, and nothing really happening. A few bands playing.
I have news on that too. Just today, apparently now that Roy Howard is dead, who owns the original Yasgur's farmhouse along Route 28, now all of a sudden on that property they are allowing a free festival, a no admission reunion festival. The town of Bethel is.
Well, it's about time, but But
Interesting.
but let me tell you,
After they
after
got the little iPhones. It's
after that,
military
Alan
practice.
Gary built Bethel Wood. He was going to build it on the original site, which would have done away with the history of Woodstock. But because we stood up and he knew that deed is fraudulent, it was clouded. He actually built Bethel Woods off the Woodstock site. So we did manage to save the Woodstock site. But from that point on, as many bands that have played there that I wanted to see, I boycotted. I will not go give my money to Bethel Wood. And all you people that go there should know the history of it, and you're giving money to the people that fought against your rights. And if you go in the museum up there in Bethel, there's no sign of anybody smoking a joint or taking a drug. And they're trying to say, oh, the history of Woodstock was this. And they've completely changed the history of Woodstock out in Bethel. So you people out there who believe in the Woodstock spirit, every time you go to Bethel Woods, you're contributing money to Alan Gary and Time Warner and all the people that are fighting against your rights to free speech.
That's how bad this shift of Channel 23, actually is. That's why I was quite astonished, Randy, at your show last Friday. It was a real eye-opener.
What specifically? I mean,
What specifically?
we covered a lot.
Was it Atlantic Records or something?
The issue with Atlantic Records being strong-armed by the then Warner Brothers to be bought out because Atlantic had a lot of jazz and soul and was getting into rock, and they basically their ownership did not want to censor them because the artists, because they wanted to make money from them, and that wasn't suitable for, at that time, Time Life Corporation. So Time Life made an offer, and all of a sudden a small jet went down containing Otis Redding and the Barkays, and all but one of the Barkays were killed. Otis Redding was killed, and after that another offer was made to Atlantic Records, and Atlantic Records again declined, and the source for this said, well, then they were said that Aretha was next. In other words, that they would sabotage and somehow find a way to assassinate Aretha Franklin. And since Atlantic was kind of a tight-knit family with its artists, they immediately sold. And what was it? Elektra was very short after that. Because Warner Brothers had been looking to take over Elektra Records as well, that had a lot of the rock acts that were eventually part of Woodstock. So then when you had WEA, which was basically being run by a mafia, and only was interested in the money on that, that was untenable for Time Life. So they took over the whole thing, and that's where the suppression of the history of Woodstock and the hippies and the counterculture that Joe was just making reference to, that's where that eventually ended up, where all of those messages were gotten out of the music, gotten out of the mainstream media, and it was cleaned up, because that's what Time Warner now is all about. That's their position. It always has been since the beginning of the 60s.
Cleaned up. Yeah,
Well, I say that in the negative form. It's whitewashed.
Right, whitewashed is better. They took in. They want to create a different picture for future generations of what the Woodstock culture was about. They want everybody to think that it was just about music. No, it was about civil rights. It was about ending the Vietnam War. It was about creating a utopian society and not a police state. It was about people being able to be free and not work enslaved their whole life for some corporation and in the end get nothing for it, or die in a hospital and have all their resources drained by doctors. I'll let you go with that one. Go ahead about doctors.
No, in Joe's book, tell him about your book, what your book is.
No, you got to buy my book if you want.
I'm
not giving away my book for free on public access.
Right, it's his DVD.
What about a donation?
Right. For sure, we're trying to figure that
My
out.
book is going to be a movie at some point, folks, so that's why I'm
These are all
holding
the-
back.
These are all the stories that Joe felt wasn't safe for himself or for his colleagues to be revealing. Like Randy was talking about the war on drugs that Nixon launched. It was actually Joe's mother who read the newspaper that saw one of their first programs was $2 million, right, for your county?
Yeah,
It was against, yeah.
yeah. Nixon started this whole war of drugs, chasing me and my friends back in New Jersey. They did a research, and they said, what counties in the country has the biggest drug use? And you would think it would have been California or New York, but it happened to be the 3 counties that me and a couple of my friends lived in. And we were selling a lot of pot, and everybody in New Jersey was getting high at that time, you know. And Nixon, when he decided, before he made it to DEA, it had some other 3-letter words, 3 letters name.
Well, I remember it being the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs.
Oh, really? Maybe that's...
Yeah, that's the way they used to give
That
out
might
that.
have been what it was, but I'm not sure right now. But
try.
anyway, when they did a survey all over the country, they found out that Sullivan County, not Sullivan County, Somerset County, Union County, and I forget the other county that we were in, were the 3 biggest counties where there would the most drug use. So Nixon said he was going to give $2 million as a grant to the police there, and they sent special federal people in to work with the local police, and they started pulling over. Every time they saw someone with long hair in a car, they'd pull them over and take the names of not just him, but all the other people that were in the car with him, and then they'd say, okay, these 3 people hang out together. And then they'd find out this person knows this group of people, and they had this board in the police station, with just like they do with the mafia families. This guy knows this guy, and this guy knows this guy. But it was just all local hippies, young kids that were just, you know, growing a little pot or selling a little pot. Yeah. And that's what, then the first $2 million was, and how they set it up, chasing me and a bunch of my friends when we were young kids, is what they used to scale the whole national, now it became the DEA, and they're still chasing us.
See, it's really a massive PR campaign, because if you really think this through and sort of retro-engineer it, a lot of people in a community or counties that are self-medicating with marijuana, even if they're not going all the way to render it into oil, because when you smoke it, you destroy most of the medicine, even if they don't go all the way to the oil, they're still doing a lot better than the pharmaceuticals that have a lot of side effects. So what you have to read with your, your accountant goggles is when they're talking about these counties as using the most drugs, it also means a market going away from the pharmaceuticals that they have vested interests in because they've patented the process. But in one show that I recently, well, actually not so recently, but recently edited that I did with Alan Steinfeld, he talks about how the plants, when the whole plant substance is used in Chinese medicine, you might mix it with 4 or 5 or even up to a complex formula of maybe 15 or so other plants. But you don't want to be tearing out what's inside the plant itself and hope that by isolating that independent of the intelligence of the entire plant, let alone being a wise healer that knows how to mix with other plants, that's not the way to go for best healing, and all the side effects are showing that. How many young women start off on antidepressants, and they have an average figure, but by the time they're 40, they're so misshapen because of the way weight goes on with some of these antidepressants, that pretty soon they have no social life except for their support group about their lousy social life. So you see that these medications are highly addictive and they're very dangerous. So what Joe was doing at a young age was actually a service to the community. It was just the free market growing. But those who wanted to monopolize on making money by extracting from people the most they can get from them, but diminishing the quality of life so much. So that what you finally see in the arsenal of the skilled nursing homes, it's pathetic. They're not serving the interests of the public to better health care. You would be better off to scuttle your insurance, start saving your money, start learning medicine yourself, just like we had to learn law. You have to learn
herbal medicine.
Yeah, you have to learn how to take care of your bodies, because these people are scam artists that are they're just fronts for the insurance company. Those are the real pushers.
Before we had all this medicine that they're making, all this phony synthetic stuff that they're giving everybody, for thousands of years people have taken herbs. I'm talking about all kinds of herbs. And our government over the years has made less and less herbs that you could. Our grandparents could go into a health food store or an apothecary and buy all kinds of herbs for all kinds of healing. In the 60s, you could get incredible different herbs in the health food stores, all for healthy and healing.
Yes,
but over the years,
to the mind, peace to the body.
But over the years, the government just kept making more and more illegal and more illegal, until now, when you go in the health food store, there's very few real healthy herbs that are going to really do the powerful job of healing you. You might get some that'll help you with your headache or help you with menstruation or stuff like that, help you with the symptoms. But there's not many herbs that they allow in the stores that actually heal anymore. Our grandparents had them. All the generations before that had it. But thanks to the DEA and the American Medical Association, the only thing you can get now is poison from the pharmaceutical companies with all kinds of side effects. It's time for people out there in America to start demanding our rights back, our right to take whatever herb or whatever medicine we want without interference from government, without only the doctor can prescribe this for you. Maybe you know better what you want. Maybe you know better. You might know about herbs that are healthy for you, and maybe you think that that's better. You should have that choice. If we live in a free country, then what you want to take as a medicine should be your choice, should be your freedom of choice for you. And we happen to know, and we've recommended, you've probably seen it on this station, Run from the Cure. Go on the internet and watch Run from the Cure full version. And watch that full version, and you're going to see that the oil extracted from marijuana, the pure oil extracted, cures cancer, cures leukemia, cures so many things. Yet our government has made that illegal to protect the interests of the pharmaceutical companies. Because if you could grow a medicine in your backyard that could cure you of cancer for relatively small cost to you, then you wouldn't go for $100,000 chemo, and you wouldn't take all these pharmaceuticals, drugs to keep you from throwing up from the chemo, or to keep so you can go to the bathroom, or to keep you, or to stop you from going to the bathroom too much. So they've created an industry on keeping you sick. They haven't created an industry on making you healthy, on really curing you or healing you. It's about draining all your wealth before you die. So they're going to run the bill up as high as they can, when for thousands of years most people had an herb garden in the backyard that they grew not just herbs for cooking, but herbs to keep themselves healthy. And that's what we should have in this country now. You want to take it away for a few minutes?
Well, I was thinking the legalization in California is really a massive PR campaign to sort of sour the public's belief and faith in the public itself, that people can be empowered to just be farmers in their own garden and figure out, what seeds are best for them and be able to trade their seeds among themselves. If just this simple thing could be done, you would see a huge renaissance. I have a dream in my heart not only for freedom towers and for IP addresses that can have emails that are not compromised for their privacy, just by knowing enough law, just by knowing the right things to say. I also have a vision for enlightened nursing homes. I really feel that that this oppressive government in every aspect of our life starts to choke out the quality of our life. whether it's coming into this, world and having to have our footprint on that awful ink as it's stamped on the original birth certificate. So, we can be entered into this arena of bondage, but that then we enter into an educational system that completely makes everything upside down so we can never see this deception, all the way to what I saw with my mother's case in the nursing home. Something that could have been such a beautiful experience, the transition as you're leaving this body, is something that's also, ruined and monetized. I think Rod Class or somebody was saying that these accounts that were set up in the 30s are still going. And that's pretty creepy. But we'll learn more about this in the future, because part of really getting the symptom of a sick body, whether it's a physical body or whether it's a social body, is when you really have diagnosed it properly. Then you know how to bring in the remedy. And that's why we bring you this information, some of which is not so pleasant, but I hope you'll see and feel the liberating quality. I remember the first time I was in court saying I didn't stand under the charges. The old clerk just woke up, and that's what we're about, right?
Yep. And we're about trying to educate you people, and so we want you to go to freedomfirstparty.net and watch the Rod Class stuff, please. It's worth doing. It's knowledge that you really want to know, and there's 7 videos that we filmed for Rod
with congressional records
that are his
right
that are his seminar. And then Paula did a show with him, and I did a show, and we strongly recommend that you go to that. We also strongly recommend that you watch Run from the Cure full version. You can Google that. No, keep going. One more. No.
False arrest, Charles A. Weissman?
No. Go ahead. Next one.
Bill
Go see One Nation Under Siege, people. And we want to remind you, we want to free all marijuana prisoners. We don't want any more going to jail. And we're saying good night from Joe and Paula and Pot Talk TV. Thank you, people. Have a good night.
You've been watching Pot Talk 2013, starring Joe Barton. Also starring Paula Gloria. Be sure to tune in next week at this same time on whatever's left of this same channel for more Pot Talk TV, which is a manifestation production.